These days, I often contemplate the nature of fear and courage. To me, these are not opposites. Courage is doing something even when I'm afraid. Courage and fear coexist. To me, the opposite of courage is not fear, but avoidance. It's hiding under the covers. It's pretending that what's happening isn't happening. I often experience courage as going forward in the face of what feels impossible. I found my courage when my 16-year-old daughter, Shira, was diagnosed with a brain tumor in the winter of 2018. And even though her odds were terrible, she had an aggressive cancer, I acted because I had to. I acted to save my beautiful daughter. My husband and I mobilized our networks. People all over the world were praying for her. I know many of you in this room were praying as well, because Romamu had a special prayer circle as she was undergoing an 8-hour surgery on her brain. Friends and family in Israel were praying for her. My extended family in Miami and South America were praying for her. Even my husband's friend in Tehran organized a prayer circle in a nearby mosque. The effort was global. And we, of course, called on modern medicine. Shira had the best of care at Sloan Kettering, and we received second and third opinions from other top cancer hospitals in the country. But I will confess to you that I also paid a mystic in Israel monthly to pray for my daughter. And I didn't even tell my husband. In fact, he's finding out about it at this moment. Because I spent hundreds of dollars on this mystic. And I knew he, an investigative reporter, would think it was ridiculous that I was wasting our money. And even though a big part of me thought that this mystic was a quack, I just had to do everything I could on every level of existence. And that was something I could do. We can talk about it later. And thank God, my daughter Shira survived. And I have no idea if it was the best of modern medicine that saved her, or the mystic in Israel, or the global network that prayed for her, or sheer luck, or all of that combined. But my point right now is to ask, what gives us courage to act, to feel like we can, even though everything around us is telling us we can't? What makes it possible to act in the face of overwhelming odds and challenges? I believe the Torah has an answer for us. Here we are in the portion of Shlach, where the difference between courage and despair, between I can and I can't, is stark. The story begins with God instructing Moshe to choose heads of the respective tribes of the children of Israel, to send out one chieftain from every tribe to scout out the land of Canaan, the promised land. And so they did. They scouted out the land for 40 days. Upon their return, they went to Moshe and Aaron and the entire Israelite community, carrying with them the massive grapes of the promised land. And they said, Vavanu el haaretz, we came to the land. Asher shlachtanu, that you sent us to. V'gam zavat chalav udvashi v'zeh priya. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Ephes, as I was saying before during the meditation, nothing, or however, or except, ki az ha'am hayoshev ba'aretz, the people sitting in this land, they're strong. V'ha'arim b'tzurot gedolot, and the cities are fortified. Ma'od, very much. V'gam yilidei ha'anak ra'inu sham. And we also saw the Anakites there, the giants. They start out affirming the promise. Yes, it's true. This is a land that flows with milk and honey. But they are frightened of the people that live there. They are frightened of the giants. And for them, the promise is nothing next to these giants. Our fears make everything that is good and right and beautiful into nothing. They go on to list all the people who live there, including Amalek, which in the Torah is the embodiment of evil, the arch enemy of Israel. And then 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, say the very opposite. They say, Alo ne'elah, let's rise up, V'yarashnu otah, and inherit it or conquer her. Ki yachol nuchala, because we can. The 10 spies respond saying, Lo nuchala lo tela'am, we can't rise up, ki chazak hu mimenu, because they are stronger than we are. And then the Torah tells us, Vayotziu dibat haaretz, so they gave out a false report. But this word dibah is very interesting. It can mean whispers or destruction. So they sent out this kind of false report about the land, saying, Haaretz asher avarnu va lator otah, eretz ochelet yoshveha. This land that you sent us to scout, this is a land that consumes its inhabitants. V'chol ha'am asher ra'inu b'tocha anshei midot. And all the people that we saw in the land are men of great stature. Right now, I feel like we are surrounded by dibah, by whispers of destruction. We are surrounded by endless fear and negativity, by deep wells of resentment, drowning out what's left of the promise, of hope, of another way of being. I am desperately searching for another way in the face of this darkness. And given their despair, it's no surprise that the spies feel so diminished. They say that they saw the giants and they felt like grasshoppers. V'nehi be'einenu kechagavim, v'kein hayinu be'einehem. In the eyes of the giants, we were grasshoppers, and so were we in our own eyes. They saw themselves as so small before these massive challenges that they felt like grasshoppers. They could not hold on to a power of something greater. Their fears made that promise into a big, fat zero, with no frame to hold them, with nothing larger than themselves to carry them. All they were left with was their smallness, with their status and stature as grasshoppers. But here's my question. What accounts for the difference between Caleb and Joshua and the rest of the spies? What's the difference between we can't and we can? This is no mere academic question. I feel like given all the giants and our giant problems we are facing at this moment, the endless fears, we need to know. I don't want to continue living a fear-based life. I don't want to hide, to live a life of avoidance or with my head in the sand. I want to live a life based in courage. I want to act meaningfully despite everything, despite the forces of destruction we are facing, and they are real. The Torah reveals to us the secret sauce, the difference between Caleb and Joshua, the difference between I can and I can't. Right here in Numbers 14, they say, Haaretz asher avarnu vala torota tova haaretz me'od me'od. The land that we crossed through to scout it out. It's really good. It's really good. Im chafetz banu Adonai. If God wants us, vehevi otanu el haaretz, and brings us into the land, hazot, this one, unetana lanu eretz asher hi savat chalav udvash, and gives us a land that is flowing with milk and honey. Ach ba'Adonai al timrodu. But against God, don't rebel. Va'atem al tiru, and don't be scared. Et am haaretz ki lachmenuhem. Don't be scared of this people in the land, because they're our bread. Sar tzilam me'alehem v'Adonai itanu al tiraum. Their protector has turned away from them, and Adonai is with us. Do not be afraid of them. So in sum, if Adonai wants us to go, if Adonai is with us, if God is with us, we'll be okay. But I admit it. This sounds a little thin. I mean, really, it seems as if they are saying if God is on our side, everything will be okay. But I interpret this differently. Something like this: if we place our faith in something greater, if we somehow hope against hope that we can act meaningfully, if we join forces with one another so that it's not only about us as individuals, not only about us as lowly grasshoppers, then maybe, just maybe, we can act in ways that make a difference. Or maybe we can just act, as opposed to putting our heads in the sand, and have faith that our actions will matter. Here's an example of that mattering. When Shira was going through chemo, after one chemo cycle, it might have been the second or third, she went through 6 altogether, she spiked a fever. And many of you know that when you're going through chemo, having a fever is really dangerous because you don't have much of an immune system. So my husband and I rushed her to the hospital, and I spent the night with her there. It was a Memorial Day weekend. Everything felt endlessly sad and scary and dark and negative, both for her and for me. I remember it palpably. We were swimming in a sea of despair. And then suddenly, our moods lifted. And for no apparent reason, we started laughing about this and that, really connecting and having a wonderful conversation. Suddenly, it felt like we were having a pajama party. And I couldn't figure out why things had shifted until I remembered that that was the night that my friends on retreat in upstate New York were holding a prayer circle for her healing. And when I inquired, I found out it was right about that time that our mood lifted. It was really amazing. And by all accounts from my friends, the prayer circle was really powerful. It seemed to work. And I'll tell you this, I now think that the mystic in Israel was a quack, but I think that this prayer circle really worked. I was recently reading something about Hirsch Goldberg Collin, the hostage that was murdered last summer when he was only 23 years old. Hirsch would give strength to other hostages, saying, or quoting, the German philosopher Nietzsche, and echoed by Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, saying, he or she who has a why can bear any how. What this means is that if you have a sense of purpose, you can deal with terrible uncertainty and suffering. But for this moment, like a good rabbi, I'm going to reread it to mean that if you have a why, then you will figure out how. When my daughter Shira was sick, I was clear as to the why, and I was willing to try any how that I could. Shira is my child, my song, my promise fulfilled, my dream, and that why was more than enough for me. So I summoned up every how I could dream of to get us through the terrible giant that we faced. Now, I feel like if I could just find my why, I might have more courage. And so I'm beginning to put my whys into words. Here's the beginning. I'm doing it for the next generation. I don't want to live a life of despair and avoidance for the sake of my children. I'm desperate to model something else for them. For the next generation is worth it, and we need to leave them a legacy of something more viable than despair and destruction. We just have to. That's my first why. It might become yours too. I also do it for the sake of all my communities, those who are holding me up and that I hold. I feel the mandate of rising up, alo na'aleh, in the words of Caleb, rising up for you and with you. And I'm doing it for the sake of those who are more vulnerable than I am, for the sake of the widow, the orphan, the stranger, because that is the vision of the Torah, and that is what we are commanded to do with our power and privilege. Do it for those that can't protect themselves. And here's another reason why. I'm a Jew, and I'm holding on to the promise made long ago to Abraham and Sarah to be a blessing. What would it mean to become a blessing in this world instead of trafficking in dibah, in whispers of destruction? So find your why, find your community, find your North Star, the promise you're holding on to. If you do, I believe the hows will follow, that the hows will multiply. It might be a global network of prayer, or marching in the streets, or standing by the side of an undocumented person as they find their way through the courthouses, as they face the terrible giants of our government. And once you find your way, your why, stand up for it. Stand up for the stranger, the widow, the orphan, the person with disabilities, those who are transgender, those who are hungry, those who are without homes, those who depend on Medicaid. Stand up for the next generation. Stand up for our wounded earth. You don't have to do all of this because none of us can. But I know that you and I, in all our uniqueness, with your resources and privileges, whatever that they might be, can act in the face of giants. The very real giants that surround us and threaten us. We can when we hold on to a divine promise. Just hold on. Hold on to that promise. We can. We can.